Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel where we are talking about engineering education in general. We also conduct discourses about current issues such as the impact of COVID-19 on higher education institutions. If you like our videos, please subscribe and click notification button down below to receive alert for our new webinar videos. Today we're going to have another UTM CEE webinar, Getting the Best of Emergency Remote Teaching ERT. First of all, I would like to invite our moderator for today's session, Associate Professor Dr. Marlia Puteh.
Hello.
Hello, Doctor. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, let me introduce you to all audience. Dr. Marlia, she is an Associate Professor from Language Academy, Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, UTM. She's also one of the fellow at the Perdana Center of Science, Technology, Innovation Policy from Razak Faculty of Technology and Informatics, and Associate Research Fellow at Center for Engineering Education, UTM. And recently, Dr. Marlia was one of the authors in two major publications in Malaysia. The first one is the Framing Malaysian Higher Education 4.0 Future-Proof Talents in year 2018. And the second one is Humanizing Higher Education for Future-Proof Talents Action Plan 2019. Welcome again, Dr. Marlia.
Thank you, Dr. Mahyudin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now let me introduce our speakers. Our first guest speaker is from University Science Malaysia, Dr. Suhairi Abdul-Sata.
Assalamualaikum. Hello everyone.
Waalaikumsalam. How are you, Doctor?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. So Dr. Suhairi is a senior lecturer from School of Chemical Engineering from University Science Malaysia. He's also a committee member of Society of Engineering Education Malaysia. Now let's move on to our second guest speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Mohammad Kamaruddin bin Abdullah. Sorry. It's a long name. Sorry, Dr. Kamaruddin.
It's okay. Yeah, hi everyone. Hi, Dr. Mahyudin.
Hi. Thank you. So Dr. Mohammad Kamaruddin is an Associate Fellow at Center for Engineering Education and is also one of the task force in UTM support group for 21st Century Teaching and Learning UTM. Let's move on to the third guest speakers. Associate Professor Dr. Mohammad Tazli Azizan.
Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi.
Waalaikumsalam. Hi. So, Dr. Mohammad Tazli Azizan is a lecturer from Chemical Engineering Department from University Technology Petronas, and he also the Vice President for Society of Engineering Education Malaysia. I think for both who are involved in engineering education, you must sign into this society, right? So welcome, Doctor, to our channel.
Thank you.
So the next and the last speaker, lovely lady from UTM, Dr. Tan Ju Siang.
Hello everyone, and good afternoon, Dr. Mahyudin, Dr. Marlia, and the rest of the speaker. I'm happy to be part of this series today.
We are lucky to have you in our session, Dr. Tan. So Dr. Tan is a registered and licensed counselor from Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities in UTM. So let's move on to our session, and I will pass this session to our moderator, Dr. Marlia.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mahyudin, for the introduction. Right, today we have four young and passionate speakers who will be talking about different topics on ERT. And today, I think I will introduce what exactly is ERT first before we proceed. Oh yes, you are given the Mentimeter. Please go to the Mentimeter, the pool survey at www.menti.com, and the questions that are asked is on which of the following challenges do you face during emergency remote teaching? Okay, I will elaborate on the result a bit later. Due to the threat of COVID-19, institutions have to figure out on how to continue teaching and learning while keeping their faculty, students, and staff safe during COVID-19 from COVID-19 virus. For that, most institutions have opted to cancel the face-to-face classes, including labs and other learning experiences, and have instructed faculties to move their courses online. Hence, as educators, we are confronted with emergency remote teaching. What is ERT, and how do we differentiate between ERT and online learning? Online learning results from careful instructional design and planning. And this design process has an impact on the quality of the instruction. And it is this careful design process that is absent in emergency remote teaching. Why? Because in contrast to online learning, ERT is a temporary shift of instructional delivery due to this crisis situation. And ERT involves the use of fully remote teaching solutions for instructions that would have been delivered face-to-face. Educators will definitely return to the face-to-face format once the crisis has passed. So in Malaysia, we know that by October, most students will return to campus and traditional face-to-face teaching will resume. Okay, now let's take a look at the Mentimeter. Okay, right. So we have, a lot of our audience, most of the top challenge that the audience have is on understanding the students. Understanding the students, and now we also have how to use the technology tools in ERT. But do not worry, we will get all our speakers to touch on each of these challenges during their respective session. So with that, I would like to introduce the first speaker for today, Dr. Suhairi from USM, who will be talking about the activities during ERT. So Dr. Suhairi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Marlia. Assalamualaikum. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking in front of you. So it's a pleasure to share with you the good practice of teaching activities during the pandemic COVID-19. We have experienced the state of emergency 4 months ago. Some of us might have exited the strict lockdown and went into recovery time with certain lenient standard operating procedure of COVID-19. Some people might not be fortunate. They are still struggling to recover. We may also have gone through a state of emergency before your children may have suffered a small cut in the finger. You must have the experience. You can easily handle this situation because it is trivial. Or perhaps you have gone through an emergency of fire blazing in your building, but it is only a fire drill. It is not real. So you are all right to save yourself out of the building because you've been trained many times. But now the situation is different. It is something never being encountered or accounted for. The teaching and learning has been disrupted. The curriculum design has gone haywire. The normal approach to have lesson delivered in front of students was prohibited. what we should do. For normal conventional approach to teaching, we have lost our audience. We have lost our premise to deliver our wisdom or knowledge to students. Ladies and gentlemen, discussion within discussion room, in the education administrator, faculty members, student, we don't know how to go about it. Parents also pretty much concerned whether the children can finish their study or not. Of course, our important audience, the affected student, were also concerned about finishing their study because perhaps due to the term about their scholarship agreement and what so not. Education was worried too. We are not ready for this. Because before this, the presence of student is there. Presence of student also there. Now they no longer exist. Design intended learning might also be on paper but not being executed properly because of this COVID SOP, standard operating procedure that being imposed. Traditional assessment is not also applicable. So this is the certain uncertainty. So discussion has been made. So one of the proposals is to get this emergency remote teaching, or perhaps some people might call it as pandemic pedagogy. But the most important aspect is to focus on this situation of design of the learning experience itself, the quality of the content, and the engagement of the learners. So these are the things that we need to think about. So the simple rules for us to plan the effective activity is: one, to communicate frequently with the student. Be flexible. And last but not least, keep it very simple. So with this simple guide, we must alter our original teaching plan with the help of digital tool. And Dr. Kamaruddin is going to talk about digital tools later on. So ladies and gentlemen, in this sharing session, I propose 3 objectives. One is to define what is constructive alignment and how you use it as a framework for teaching and learning. Number 2, you must know how to use the original teaching and plan for redesigning the lesson for the ERT. And last but not least is to use the taxonomy, ICAP, or interactive, constructive, active, and passive. So we move on to the next slide. So let us first discuss about the framework. So this is our guiding rule for designing lesson. The framework has 2 models. One is the constructive alignment, and the other one is the taxonomy of interactive, constructive, active, and passive, or ICAP. So first, ladies and gentlemen, the constructive alignment has 3 dynamic elements which position themselves nicely and evenly. And these elements are learning objective, learning delivery, and learning assessment. So for the activity, we will focus our discussion on the delivery. So in this context, the delivery use active learning techniques. So the next model is the ICAP taxonomy, which consolidate 4 items: passive, active, constructive, and interactive. You may refer to the note later on. So let us analyze the situation of the current plan lesson. So you may see the next slide in front of you. In the next normal teaching and learning session, the instructor and students stay together in the classroom. Active learning can get students to engage with content, instructor and other students socially and visibly. On contrary, the pandemic situation could not allow for that similar situation. Social and visible connection is normal. Instructor and fellow friends are not there possibly. So ladies and gentlemen, there are 4 items to help delivering the intended learning objective. 1 is the video clip. 2, fill in the gap handout. 3, video recording. And last but not least, the quiz. These are the formal one that we always use. So what is the use of this item, ladies and gentlemen? Video clip gives you prior knowledge before students engage into high-level discussion. Fill-in gap handout help us to secure concept or learning by doing. And thirdly, video recording trains students to declare the understanding of the word given in FIG handouts. FIG handouts stand for fill in the gap handouts. So last but not least, quizzes are used to gauge their learning gain and it's also a form of formative assessment. So we move on to the next slide. So I propose the operational activity of ERT in 4 phases. 1 phase is in the informal ERT time, and the other 3 phases are in the formal ERT time. So we can see that the breakout of the formal ERT time window includes both synchronous and asynchronous teachers. Okay, the first phase requires students to work on their own, and they may work with friends. During the second and fourth, students have the instructor and their colleague in the virtual connector. So ladies and gentlemen, next, we now see the suggested time for the 4 phases. The time for the first phase requires about half an hour. Maybe it can be longer than half an hour. And the respective 3 phases are in the 1-6, 4-6, and 1-6. And if your total time is 60 minutes, then the time for each one will be 10, 40, and 10. However, ladies and gentlemen, this is only suggestion, so it's up to you to decide. But for you, it's good to have the asynchronous one to be longer, because it gives you some flexibility and easiness for the student. So since I suggest that the time for the activity is long in that section, I use WhatsApp text and voices. Students are allowed to communicate through the email chat box, even in the streaming application like Zoom, StreamYard, or Webex. So if you use synchronous mode, you can see that I use webcam to stream live. So some of my presentation is mixed between the synchronous and asynchronous. So ladies and gentlemen, next, we will see what is the supplementary activity item that support the ERT. For the best illustration, I have picked up phase 3 as my example. In this phase, I post the fill-in gap or FIG handout and related video before starting the phase 2. I explain the FIG handout in the phase 2, and bear in mind that the best duration of video is 5 to 6 minutes if you want to give the video to the student. So you explain also the intended learning objective in this phase, and additionally, you can also tell your student what to expect from this session. Let's go back to the phase number 3. So the video clip within 5 to 6 minutes must be supporting the workout in the FIG. So the FIG must have about 4 to 5 questions. It also depends on how long is your class. If you're 2 hours, then you got 4 or 5 questions. If it's only 1 hour, maybe 1 or 3 questions, it would be enough. So before you proceed to this phase, you must tell your student in phase 2, which is during your explanation, how you want them to report their progress. Also, perhaps within 4 or 2 minutes after that, you want students to prepare a simple recording explaining what they have done and the outcome of the selected task in the FIG. Identify a few names randomly, pick out 5 students as a rule of thumb, and give them some time to record their explanation within 1 week. So after that, you pick up these 5 people to send the video to you, and you are able to give them feedback. This feedback will be in the phase number 4. So you continue the task until the next time. If you want to select another task in the FIG, then you may do so. After that, you are able to get to student doing the thing by their own and also show their work to you for comment. So at the end, in the phase 4, you are able to give your comment after they have delivered to you. So ladies and gentlemen, we can go to another activity. Maybe there be a plenty of media that you can do. For example, Facebook. You can get these tools later from Dr. Kamaruddin, the second speaker. For my activity, I use Padlet as my tool. Students were asked to share their work in the Padlet. Once everyone has posted their work, I ask them to comment with reference to their own work. So use this question as a guide. What is the difference? What is the similarity between your answer and your friend's answer? So for the task, once you don't also pick one posting, and they must look for posting which has not been commented. This is the critic task, and students learn from the other work. So ladies and gentlemen, I also create an activity where students need to discuss in WhatsApp application. Do you know that WhatsApp conversation can be important to you? So of course, this is not frequent. You cannot allow this every time. So ladies and gentlemen, you can see that these activity features with ICAP taxonomy. So if they are in the discussion with the team member or with a partner, they are in the interactive level of taxonomy. If they do quiz in phase 2, they are in the active level. Using these various activity, we can get all level of taxonomy, and this activity bring the student into higher level of thinking. So next, ladies and gentlemen, we see that all phases, there are many activities based on different phases using supplementary item. I have video watching, FIG handout in the first place. In the next phase, you may ask definition in the first phase. You can also have a quiz in phase 2 that assess their prior knowledge. You may ask them to watch video clip as you asked, haven't they? In the last phase, you can again ask them to do a post quiz. You can gauge the learning gain in this phase. So ladies and gentlemen, let me share my experience for the first 7 weeks. I use this activity for computer programming and application for chemical engineering. So the pandemic struck the midway to the teaching. I have used 7 to 4 5AG handout, 2 critics tasks. I also have a project. I have 4 to 5 quizzes along the way. Though it looks plenty, but at the end, you will give you some feedback on how you're going to do. So of course, finally, you're not going to grade everything. You might pick up something for you to be graded. So ladies and gentlemen, I have come to the conclusion. To get the effective activities for ERT, you must refer to constructing alignment and use effective delivery like active learning. Use your original plan and alter it accordingly using available, simple, flexible tool. And you can get it from Dr. Kamaruddin later. Engage your students with the tasks that promote constructive and interactive taxonomy level. And finally, use a fill-in-gap handout to get your student learn by doing. You may refer this to the supplementary note, watch the recording of the webinar and maybe fill in the blank in the note. If you are interested to get the Bahasa Melayu version of this presentation, you may contact me through my email and phone number. With that, I thank you for your patience watching this presentation. I hand over the session back to Dr. Marlia. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Marlia.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Suhairi, for the very interesting input just now. So we know that, thank you for putting it in a proper framework and giving the sample of activities that you have utilized in your classroom, online classroom. So now I would like to look at the question for Dr. Suhairi to answer. So Dr. Suhairi, the question that is given to you, how to conduct active learning online? For example, how to do think, pair, share, or peer teaching during online distance learning.
All right, thank you. So to Azam, thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question because we know that active learning has been done face to face, especially when we use a think, pair, share. But now we don't have the people in front of us to share the thing that we have done. But the little thing that you can do is by you can create a WhatsApp group and you can do the chatting between these two people. Okay, I have my group from a WhatsApp group chat. So what they do, they discuss the thing in the WhatsApp and they'll share it with me later on. So these are the things that you can do, or you can ask them either to do it online. So you have a group on their own, picking up or using the StreamYard or using the WebEx or using the team, Microsoft Team for them to do this kind of interaction. I think it is possible. The only thing that is not easy is your real existence in front of your friend, but you can do it virtually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Suhairi. A very passionate educator, we can see that. Okay, I think we only have time for one question. Okay. Dr. Suhairi, would you like to discuss the Mentimeter?
Okay, all right. So So what is the frequent activity? This is very interesting. We see that a lot of discussion. You have a handouts, pretty much to what we have done it. Yeah, you have a quiz over there. You also have a group WhatsApp video sharing, or even a favorite course. So it depends on how you're going to do it. So if you have the discussion, you can do it through the WhatsApp. This is the low band kind of communication. Of course, if you can afford to have a online face-to-face streaming with your friend, with the discussion, it will be very, very good, and it's also fruitful for you to use. Okay,
yeah.
Dr.
All right, thank you for the input given. Now we know that for activities in ERT, we do not only focus just online, we also have we combine both synchronous and asynchronous approaches to reach our objective in teaching. Thank you, Dr. Suhairi, for the sharing session.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right, we'll get back to you a bit later. Okay, so now I would like to introduce the second speaker for today, who will be talking about the tools that we can use during emergency remote teaching. Dr. Associate Professor Dr. Kamaruddin from UTM, who will be sharing with us his experience in using the tools for ERT. So Dr. Kamaruddin, what are the tools? Over to you.
Alright, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Marlia, for the nice introduction. First of all, I would like to thank CEE UTM for giving me this opportunity to share my experience in implementing ERT, especially in selecting suitable online tool for meaningful learning. Just now, our first panel, Dr. Suhairi, has presented in more detail about the effective activity for ERT. Now, it is my task to share my experience in selecting and also utilization of suitable tools for ERT. So this is my presentation or my webinar sharing outline. So there are three points that I would like to share here. The first is about the selection of ERT tools. The second point is the most important tools that we need to have in order to implement ERT, which is LMS, Learning Management System. And the third point is about examples, how that I use to select tools in different type of activity that has been mentioned by our previous panel. All right, let's go to the first point, which is how that we select the suitable tools for ERT. So in this case, we need to consider what we call it constructive alignment. The same thing has been mentioned by Dr. Suhairi, which is the same thing, which is constructive alignment. So what is basically constructive alignment? If you want to select suitable tools, then we need to consider another criteria. In this case, we need to consider teaching and learning activity. The selection of our tools mostly suitable with the teaching and learning activity together with the teaching and learning objective. Right? And since we implementing ERT, therefore there is one big constraint that we need to consider also, which we call it, which is basically a internet constraint. So this is the most important thing that we want to consider when we want to select the tools for our online class. So if you want to select tools, first of all, identify your teaching activity, and then also the objective of this learning activity, teaching learning activity, and then after that, consider the internet constraint, and after that, then you identify which tool that basically is suitable for your planned teaching and learning. All right, I will give 3 examples for this selection later at the end of my session. Good. So this is the way how that we select the tools for ERT. All right, we go to the next point, which we call it LMS, Learning Management System. LMS is very important. Before we want to start ERT, before we want to start ODL, or before we want to start online learning, LMS should be there. We need to start use the LMS first, because using the LMS, we can deliver our instruction, we can deliver our material, we can deliver our content within it. And also using LMS, student can submit their deliverables. We can also do some discussion there in the LMS, do certain assessment, depending on what type of LMS that you use. In UTM, we use Moodle, which is, we call it UTM e-learning. But out there, there are several LMS tools available, such as Edmodo, and also the one which is, I think, most famous for Malaysian teachers, which is Google Classroom. So before we want to select the tools, make sure that we apply LMS first. Okay, so, and then we go to the third point. So in this, I will share with you 3 examples how to select tools for suitable ERT teaching activities. So the first, we have an online lecture, and after that we have online class discussion. And lastly, I will share my experience in selecting tools for online group discussion. Okay, let's go for the first activity, which is online lecture. So the activity, we call it online lecture. So it is the same thing as what we have a face-to-face lecture. Okay, the objective is to deliver content with the help of Microsoft PowerPoint. During our normal face-to-face lecture, we also use PowerPoint and Microsoft PowerPoint in order for us to help us in delivering our content. Right? So the tools that we want to use or we want to select should able not only deliver our learning content, but also able to use Microsoft PowerPoint. Okay, so next we look at the constraint. Either we are having internet constraint or not. As what mentioned by Dr. Suhairi, either we can use synchronous approach or asynchronous approach. So when we don't have any internet constraint, meaning it's this is a synchronous approach. So if you don't have any internet constraint at all, then these are options for you to select. You can have a Zoom, you can have a WebEx, you can have a Google Meet, or you can have a Microsoft Teams. All of these able for us have a capability or help us in delivering content, and also it has a capability for us to share our Microsoft PowerPoint. Okay, so this is the case when we don't have any internet constraint at all. But what happened? What happened if we, as an instructor, as a lecturer, and as a student, having internet constraint, having internet problem? So what kind of tools that we can use such that we're able to deliver the content and also able to support Microsoft PowerPoint? Because Microsoft PowerPoint is very important, because this is the tool that we use to deliver our content, right? So the tools that we want to select should have this capability. So in my case, in my experience, I use these tools. First, I use YouTube. I recorded my lecture in a PowerPoint in a YouTube. Then after that, I upload it or share it with my student through WhatsApp or through Telegram. So delivery content is there. And also the Microsoft Point, right? I think we don't have any problem on this, because I think a lot of us quite familiar with synchronous and also asynchronous online lecture. Okay, so the only thing that there are several options that we can use for this online lecture, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous. Okay, now we go for the second case study or second example, how that we select suitable tools for online class discussion. All right, there's a question before this, asking how that we make class online active, or how to make an active online class. So the short answer or the simple answer is make your lecture active. So if it is an online active class, so make sure that we have several activity such that students in our online class become active. So online class discussion is part of that activity for active learning. Okay, let's look the objective of this online class discussion. Online class discussion basically is to discuss the content after we have online lecture. Okay, after we have a 10 or 12 minutes of a micro teaching class or micro teaching lecture, then we stop the class and ask students to do a simple online discussion, maximum about 5 minutes. Okay, but how to select tools if we don't have any internet constraint at all? So there are several tools available out there. This is the example tools that if we can use if we don't have any internet constraint. So we can use the same thing as what we use in online class, WebEx, Zoom, whatever, because these tools have a capability to do two-way communication. Okay, we can deliver our content, we can speak, our student also able to see our content, and they're also able to respond to our questions. So this is a very simple tools that we can use for online class discussion if we don't have any internet constraint at all. All right, there will be another question. What happens if we have an internet constraint? So in my case, if we have internet constraint and we want to do the online class discussion, we can use Mentimeter, for example. This is from my experience. Or you can use also Padlet, because using these tools, basically students able to share their opinion, share their idea. They can brainstorm their idea, or we can ask several simple questions like this: how that they understand about our previous online lecture. So this is one example that we can use for online class discussion if we have a internet constraint. So this is what we call it a synchronous online class discussion. Okay, that is another name. Okay, we have seen the selection of, we have discussed the selection of online class, either we have internet constraint or not. Then we have an online class discussion. There are several tools that we can use to also. And also next, the last example that I want to share is online group discussion. Okay, online group discussion is the same as the online class discussion. The only difference is the discussion should be implemented in a group, such that students able to have more understanding on our online lecture. Okay, previously it's just a class discussion, but now this is a very specific for a specific team or group. So what can we use if we don't have any internet constraint at all, or if you want to use what we call it a synchronous approach? So the tool available is still the same as what we have for the online class and also online class discussion. For this, we can utilize a special function within Zoom, within WebEx, within Microsoft Teams, which we call it breakout rooms. Okay, breakout rooms. We can divide our student into several rooms, different rooms, and we as a host, as an instructor, we can enter to this room. Okay, so and then we can do some discussion with our student there. So this is an example how that I conducted a synchronous group discussion with my student. This is special for the plant design students. So the idea is that we can representing the real group discussion as shown in the left-hand side. So this is the group discussion happened during the face-to-face session in a class. So the breakout room is very important if we want to use online group discussion using synchronous approach. Okay, and the last one, what happened or what kind of tools that we can use if we have internet constraint, especially if you want to do the online group discussion. So again, based on my experience, I use Google Jamboard. This is, we call it online remote collaborative tools. As you can see there, this is the real activity happened during the discussion, group discussion using Google Jamboard. What happened there? Students basically collaboratively contribute their knowledge, because as a team activity, they need to have their prior knowledge. They need to learn the knowledge, or they need to learn the concept previously before coming to this kind of activity. So there is an interaction there between the student within the group, within the team. Okay, so the idea is that we want to representing what happened in the class as we have a face-to-face session, as what shown in this slide in the left-hand side. So the advantage also, when we use Google Jamboard, student able to jump from one jam to another jam. These different jam representing different team, and they can do comment, they can review what they have done by the student, the student from the other team, and they can comment it. So this is example where in my class that I have team peer teaching mind map. Students need to construct the mind map such that they can teach other students. So this is another question asked previously, which is about peer teaching. So this is how we implement the peer teaching activity online. So you can use Google Jamboard. Okay, so as a conclusion, if you want to select the right tool for the emergency remote teaching, first thing first, that you need to consider the activity that you want to use. So there are several activity has been mentioned by our first panel, and also the objective, align it with the objective. And after that, consider the constraint, especially the internet constraint. Then you can able to select what tools suitable you can use in order to make sure that student will experience the meaningful learning. All right, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Marlia.
Thank you, Dr. Kama, for the sharing session. At least I learned something new today, the Google Jamboard. Okay, yeah, maybe I can, that's something new for me. Okay, so maybe now let's take a look at the question that has been posed to you, Dr. Kama. Asked by Dr. Hadijah binti Jafri, how to get our students who experience bad internet connectivity during synchronous session. A session like this clearly not an option. Okay, so Dr. Kama.
It's a good question. Thank you for that question, especially, okay. First thing that we need to consider, if you want to select the tool, make sure that we know whether we have an internet connection or not. This is very important. So if you don't have any internet connection problem, then you can use synchronous. If you're having internet connection, then you can have a synchronous. Okay, I have shown another option that we can use, or tools that you can use if you have a synchronous, or if you want to use a synchronous. Okay, as long as the objective and also the activity that you want to use for your class can be achieved. For example, for online class or online, for online learning. So our objective is basically to deliver content, to deliver knowledge. Okay, so synchronous, you can use Zoom, you can use Google Meet or whatever, if you don't have any internet connection. But if you have internet connection, then you can use asynchronous, which is basically you can use WhatsApp, you can use Telegram, you can use YouTube, as long as your objective able to be achieved, delivering the content. Okay.
Yeah.
For the online discussion, I have also showed the example. You can use for the group discussion, you can use the Jamboard, because Jamboard require less bandwidth, low bandwidth, rather than if you want to use Zoom with the function, breakout function.
Okay.
All right.
So meaning that if we do not use,
I can answer that question.
Oh yeah. Okay. So if we don't use the online conferencing tools such as Zoom, then we have also options like WhatsApp or Telegram. Okay, another question that we have here is from Dr. Mariana Ma'ruf. Webex boleh buat group breakout room? So can Webex, can we do breakout room for Webex?
Okay. Now is most of the breakout room is basically started in Zoom, and now most of the company, especially Webex, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, already implemented the same thing. Okay, well, although I've not implemented or used that frequently, but I'm sure that there is a available function within the WebEx. Yes, I do.
Right. Okay, thank
You
you,
can do the
Dr.
breakout room.
Yeah. So Webex, you can use breakout rooms there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Kama, for your input.
Thank you.
We have heard Dr. Kama mention about internet connectivity that students have issues with. So this brings me to introduce to the third speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Mohammad Tazli Azizan from UTP, who will be discussing on empathy in online teaching. So Dr. Mohammad Tazli, welcome to CEE Seminar Series.
Thank you, Dr. Marlia. First of all, thank you very much to Center for Engineering Education, UTM, for inviting me to become the speaker for this particular webinar session. First of all, I have to declare myself. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not somebody who can give a professional advice about what I'm going to talk about. But this is more towards like sharing of what I have learned throughout this particular session about during this emergency remote teaching. All this while, I've been trying myself to become more empathetic towards my students, and I think when I try to reflect from what I experienced, like being an educator since for the 10 to 15 years ago, it makes a difference, especially when it comes during this particular time when we have this emergency during remote teaching. It opened up my eyes more bigger actually to see that sometimes it is not what we think and what we feel matters. It is also about what our students are going through is also important. Okay, so so today's session is about how we as an educator to become an empathetic educator during this emergency remote teaching, and hopefully be able to become an empathetic educator throughout our tenure as the educator. So moving to the next slides, I'm going to share with you about the meaning of the emergency remote teaching. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so remote teaching next is actually this is what I took from an article that was written in March 2020 when we have this COVID-19 and most of the country announcing about the lockdown. Okay, so this is actually when we talk about emergency remote teaching, it is a temporary shift of instructional delivery. The next paragraph. So the primary objective in these circumstances is not to recreate a robust educational ecosystem, but it is about to provide temporary access to instruction when actually we're trying to overcome this particular crisis. Okay, so this is actually from the article itself. It highlight that what happened in the past in Afghanistan when actually during the regime of Taliban that the girls are not allowed to go to school. And during that particular time, it is an emergency remote teaching for these Afghanistani girls because they couldn't go to school. So what happened is that there are NGOs who provided some kind of like DVD so that they can play at home and they can learn from home. So imagine ourselves, we are just fortunate that at the moment now, Alhamdulillah, we got an internet connection, but it's not so vast. Some people may not have a good internet like us. Some people may not, if let's say they are learning from home, they may not be able to have the comfort as what we did as an educator. For example, we are just working from home. So these are the things that we have to put in our mind. These are the things that we have to consider when we are actually trying to plan for the teaching lesson to our students. We'll go to the next slide. The general issues during ERT, actually I try to combine the all together 4 general issues. Can pick next. Okay. Which is the first one is in terms of internet accessibility and affordability. The first one, when I talk about internet accessibility, we have some of our students who actually have a good connection, who actually have sufficient in term of wealth. They can purchase data, they can have they can buy internet, but there is no internet at their place, and that is one issue. For example, like maybe they are living in the area which is quite difficult for them to get some access. Me myself, I have a problem. If let's say I went back to my hometown in Perlis, my parents still cannot have an upgrade of the streaming, which is still at 1 megabyte per second. So I have to resort myself to purchase yes 4G data at that time in order for me to access the internet. So I can feel that if let's say I have that is already in, which is in Kanga, but if let's say some of my students who live far away, which is not within this particular not in the urban area, so how they going to actually face the situation when there is no internet connection? That is one thing. The second one is about internet affordability. Some of the students, okay, may live in an area where actually the internet is accessible, but they may have in terms of limited income for them to purchase the data. So that so we cannot actually provide, for example, like if let's say we have a frequent video session, streaming session, live session using certain platform which consume a lot of data, it will consume their data, you know, and they have to purchase more data in, and anyway it's actually they may not be wealthy enough in order for them to have that luxury of having more data. The second one is also related to that. When we talk about social and economic crisis. For example, like some of the students, they dreaded to go back from university. They dreaded to go back to their home because of some of economic crisis, some of the social crisis. Maybe their parents are not in a good term, for example. Maybe they have too many siblings at home. They do not have privacy. So these are the things that we have to consider when actually we want to give some kind of lessons for the students. Okay, and then maybe at the same time, because of the COVID-19, some of the parents lost their job. So this is the possibility that they could face, and maybe their parents need them to help them with the house chores and to help finding some money, some income for the family, because they do not have a sufficient job. You know, they do not have sufficient income for that. So that is the second issue. The third one is actually the mental readiness among the students. As we could say that, for example, the students didn't have privacy. I have actually encountered some of the students whenever that we have live session, he or she sitting at the kitchen, you know, the kitchen at the back of the kitchen, because they just want some kind of privacy. And of course, if let's say you can imagine, for example, like I have my class for 2 hours. The next one, he or she have to attend another class for 2 hours. And then they have to stay in front of the computer for the next 6 to 7 hours because of attending the lessons. So how actually best that we could deliver empathetically? So these are the things that we have to think of. And the final one is, of course, to ourselves, is the technology adoption among the educators. Not all of us are well versed of using this technology, although that we think that the students are good with the technology, but we cannot assume that everyone are good with that. Okay, so these are some general issues during the emergency remote teaching. Next slide. So we talk about having an empathy for this. So what is actually empathy? Empathy is about ability to step. If we try to put ourselves in other people's shoes. In our case, as an educator, we try to put ourselves in the student's shoes. Okay, what would they feel? What is their perspective on this particular matter? When I'm trying to do this, when I'm arranging something like this, what would they feel? How they're going to overcome this? So, and then this particular trying to think about what other people feel and perceive, we use that to guide our actions. Okay, so that is what is meant by empathy. And empathy ni is not like macam naturally. Okay, it's not a naturally, and then it's not a is something that we can learn. Okay, it's something we can learn. It is something about the skill that we want to what do you call that? It's a skill that actually we can learn and absorb to ourselves. So over the time, for example, like for the past 10 to 15 years, I think I am being more empathetic now in comparison to my younger age. So Alhamdulillah, I think it's something that you can learn and do it yourself. So before I proceed to the next slide, maybe I want to share a Mentimeter questions to you that I would like you to answer this question. Okay. So the question is, why do you think we need to have empathy, especially during ERT? Okay, so some of you have answered the question. Okay, let me have a look at the one of the answer is actually to understand student situation, to help them, to understand students ready. Is one of the means and major means to connect with the students. Each stakeholder may experience different set of difficulties. Yes, these are actually the reason why we need to become really empathetic as an educator. We need to have empathy as an educator. Okay, because it is not that everyone, okay, it's not that everyone is the same boat like us. Which bring me to the next slide. If you can bring me to the next slide. Okay, I chose this picture because it really brings some meaning. You see, can see that it's a rough sea. We are in the middle of the crisis, in middle of the COVID-19. Some people, they ride on a yacht. Some people, they ride on a speedboat. Some people, they ride on a big cruise ship like a Titanic. Some might be just in a sampan, you know. So we are in the same crisis, but we are in a different boat. So those are the things that we have to remember. Not all the students have the comfort as what we are actually having. For example, like we as a lecturer, we may have our own home office, sitting lavishly on an IKEA chair, yeah, that we bought from IKEA, having a good internet speed at 300 megabyte per second. So, but then we cannot assume that the students have the same luxury as us. Okay, so but then so this is one of the reason why actually we need to really have empathy, because the next point is, we go to the next point, why empathy is needed during ERT. Empathetic leadership is one of the important skills in 21st century. Sometimes we can see around us, for example, like, you know, we can see people without empathy. We can see people, especially you can see from the internet itself, the netizens are, you know, using the term of membawang, you know, because sometimes they do not have the empathy. They do not understand what other people are undergoing through. So this is actually the problem. If let's say we don't nurture empathy in our student, if let's say we do not ourselves having these empathy traits, our student will not have this empathy trait, which is coming through to the next point. We want our future leaders and generation to have empathy, so we should have one. Okay, the next point. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that our action, even a small one, leads to the changing behavior of the students. I have this during this particular crisis, I have this one student. Actually, I'm teaching a small group number of students. So before I conduct the live session for them, I did what I did before the start of the semester. I usually make a survey about the internet connectivity. In the past semester, I also have an experience teaching 170 students during it's a blend between PKP time as well as the face-to-face session. Towards the end, we have to conduct using online method. And I found that some of the students only have 120 kilobyte per second. That is the connection of the internet that they have. So we have to think about, how do I conduct a session with this, you know? So that's why I resort to low bandwidth technology, such as using Telegram. You know, in Telegram, there are so many things that you can do. For example, like you can do polls, you can do quizzes. Even actually when you put some kind of questions or videos over there, the students still can access. Even YouTube is a low bandwidth technology. So the student can access at their own sweet time. Okay. So I have this particular semester, I have the case of one student who I know in earlier when I actually did a quiz. The student said, I cannot attempt the quiz because I'm bringing my mom from the hospital to the house. And then she said she's already terminally ill. Okay. So I told this particular student, it's okay, you can take some other times. And then the next week, we actually having a test. But I didn't ask question. I forgot to ask to ask the same question. For example, like how's your mom, for example. But she was there to answer the test. And then she answered it very quick. And when I look at the script, it was very bad. You see? And then I quickly sent message to her through Telegram, and I asked her, how are you? How is your mom? She said that her mom passed away that Thursday before. But she didn't dare to tell me in the first place. Of course, if I know that if her mom passed away, I would just actually cancel her test. I would say to her that you can just take your own time, and then after that, I can do another test to you. And I see the answer script was very bad. So I said to her, look, I know that you're not okay, and I'm going to cancel this test for you. And I'm going to do another test for you in the few weeks after you say to me that you are ready to take the test. And then it's actually, she felt relief actually. And I think she was crying because she feel that the educators, the lecturers like us may be heartless about this situation to her. But I said that it's okay, because if I were you, I may not be strong as you to attempt this test at this particular time, you see. So the students are very thankful, and then after a few weeks, I can start to see her becoming cheerful again. And yesterday I messaged her and I asked her, how are you? How are you getting along with this? And she said she's fine. I said, you are a very strong girl, and I'm not sure that I'm very strong as you. So then she's very thankful. She said that after I got to know her situation, I alerted other lecturers who also teach her. So that's where actually we start to make sure that she's can adapt well. Because I also advised her, why not you defer for this semester? She said that she discussed with her family, but her family asked her to continue. That is one of the case where actually empathy really plays a role to guide our action. We may just feel that this is very, tedious, for example, for us to create another question for the test. But we have to bear in mind, what we are teaching our students is not only about academic and cognitive. We are also nurturing values to them. We want them to have values in the future. We just do not want simply them, for example, having a good CGPA grade, but at the same time without values. But alhamdulillah, I feel that I have done one deed to her, that hopefully that she will have those things in mind, that she will continue to do her best for others as well in the future. The next slide. So these are some tips that I would like to share. Before that, I will ask you to, for example, if you were his or her educator, what would you do? And then I just want all the picture come out. Maybe you can just click all the pictures to come out. So for example, like this case where you have a Sarawakian girl and Sabahan girl, where they have to camp inside the jungle on top of the tree in order for them to do some online tests. If let's say we are an empathetic educator, what would we do? I hope that this situation can be avoided actually, right? So for example, like if let's say there is another guy over there who have to become a food rider to support his family. As an empathetic educator, what would we do? For example, there is a young guy over there having parents quarreling at home, having no privacy. As an empathetic educator, what would we do? And this is one case where I got from one of the students, which is anonymous. What he mentioned is that just online semester is really hard to manage, especially for people without stable internet connection, a proper place to study, also other challenges. It is really tough and tiring. And they kata, during my test my data was not good, so I couldn't submit my test in time. Have to drive out 10 minutes to find good signal, and by the time I wanted to submit, the submission was closed. I have to email my lecturer, but it was already too late and he didn't really want to believe me, and he actually deducted a lot of mark, which that is some kind of the scenario that we are facing. You know, the students are not in the same boat like us. So these are the things that we have to question ourselves. Our action is right. Are we becoming empathetic enough to our students to make sure that they learn something out of this? Okay, the next slide. So I would like to share with you some of the tips. Okay, can we go to the what I've been shared? Until tips number 4. Okay, tips 1. First of all, is about checking the internet accessibility and affordability. That's the first one. Second one is about synchronizing teaching schedule and student workload with colleagues. I think this is very important, even though that the students have their own timetable, but actually we shouldn't have to spend a lot of time doing live teaching, and there must be a lot of time on asynchronous learning. Because during the live teaching, you know, for example, like we are doing class at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the evening, in the afternoon, for example, that during that particular time, students may not have their privacy in order for them to attend the class. They may have the time, you know, maybe during after their siblings went to sleep at night, maybe at 11 p.m. That is the time for them to actually go through the videos of learning so that they can do some revision over there. So these are the things that we have to bear in mind. So do not like really spend a lot of time doing this particular live teaching. And which brings to me the third tips, which is blending synchronous and asynchronous. For me, I know that as an educator teaching in ERT, our preparation is 3 times more than what we did in a face-to-face class. Because on top of conducting some kind of live session, you must know that some of the students may not be able to get what you're trying to teach. Especially me teaching chemical engineering, material and energy balance for first year students. It's very hard. Okay. So I have to prepare a separate video for that, so that they can enjoy a smaller chunk videos from 4 to 5 minutes per video. Okay, maybe sometimes I extend a bit to up to 8 minutes, and the students are very thankful for that particular video. Tips number 4 is actually provide live access more towards discussion. So what I did the most whenever that I have the live session is about students discussing among themselves. The breakout rooms, that as what Dr. Kamaruddin suggested. The next one, next slide. Okay. Tips 5 is about actually provide online community support for the students. The most important part actually when the students are having this particular WhatsApp or Telegram group, they feel that there is an online community which is supporting them. Okay, they do not only depending to us, but they know that their friends, their peers, online peers can support them as well. If let's say they have question, I always direct them, please ask in the WhatsApp group or Telegram group, so that somebody else can respond to you. And at the same time, it's good feedback for us, whether actually only this particular student didn't know the answer, or there are also the whole students didn't know what actually we're trying to explain. So providing this particular support is good for the students. Another thing is actually provide regular formative assessment, such as using Mentimeter, Padlet, as what Dr. Kamaruddin have shared earlier, and Dr. Suhairi as well. The most important part also, do not over-assign the assignment. Sometimes we make sure that assignment is impactful enough, but it doesn't actually have to be repetitive. I recall experience, for example, like we sometimes the educator are so much into like, afraid that the students are copying each other. We are lacking of trust to the students, and maybe another challenge for us, because we do not know, we are not creative enough to actually to create a good question that is open-ended enough for the students to attempt by their own. So this is something that we have to learn. Okay, because I got to know that, for example, like there are maybe some of the lecturers who just starting doing this, and then after give a quiz, and then they said, okay, after 15 minutes you have to submit, and then I'll give you another quiz for the next 15 minutes. Which for me, that is the scenario where the students may have internet intermittency during that time. So what happened to that particular student? He or she may not be able to answer the question. To ignite the motivation of the students, you may want to gamify the experience. For example, like you put a challenge to the student as a team, so that they can work together in order for them to get to know the learning material better. And finally, it's about providing platform for feedback and reflection, which is so that we genuinely care. I remember that by using reflection is also something that I can get to know better of my student. For example, that is where the place that the student feels safe to share. I have a problem like this at home. I have a problem, for example, like understanding the material. So this actually guide me to prepare more for the students, to have more access to the students. Okay, the next slide. I think this is gonna be the final slide. Becoming an empathetic educator. Okay, you can flash everything. So these are some other tips I think that would work when actually you start to giving assignments to the students. The first one is about to reduce the frequency of the assignments. Give an impactful one so that they can work on their own. For example, like you give an assignment within 1 week or 2 weeks time, submit one. Okay, but then you have to make sure it covers your learning outcome as a whole. The second one is assignment of durations need to be considerately decided, and we need to avoid unplanned assessment at all costs. Okay, I feel that you have to give more scaffolding than usual. That is very important, and try to give doable in online integrated project. Okay, so that the student doesn't have too many projects that they have to do. Try to combine 2 or 3 courses together as a project. So I think that's all for my sharing. I leave you with one question in the last slide. Maybe you can answer in the live comment section. How actually do we nurture empathy among the students during this testing time? Okay, so I pass back to Dr. Marlia. Sorry for taking a little bit more time, but that's all. Thank you.
Dr. Tazli, I enjoy listening to the stories. I think most of us have experienced those problems with our students, but the thing is whether we show our concern to the students or not. That is how the students see us, and do we communicate our empathy to the students through our actions? Yeah. So now we will look at the question from the live chat from Prof. Rozhan.
Prof. Rozhan.
Yep.
He knows the answer better actually.
Okay, so now let's look at the question: how to watch missed online class when you don't have internet or are not connected?
I think this goes back to my first tips just now about checking the internet accessibility and affordability of the students. So these are the first thing that we have to do as an educator before the start of the semester. We got the list, try to get the list of the students, try to get the information, try to get to know them. Who are they? Where they're from? Where are they currently reside at? And actually and see that what is their internet speed. If let's say they do not have internet speed, this is where actually you start to make some action. Contact them in advance. I like the situation where there is one teacher in Sarawak. He live in a very remote area. Of course, the students over there, the primary school, secondary school, do not have internet access. So what he did, he took an extra work actually sending some kind of assignment weekly. Sending weekly basis to. I mean, these some things that we have to tailor make to the students' need, because, for example, like in our institution, of course, they are paying students, right? And I think in private university they also pay for it. I mean for some tuition fees. So they deserve actually to get at least an equity in terms of what they learn. So we have to think about that lah. There are in the past like maktab post gaya adabi. Maybe we have to repeat that. Maybe we have to do that. So that our students got at least sufficient material for them to learn.
Okay. Let's go to the second question from Dr. Hasrina Hasbullah. How can we make sure that students won't exploit or take advantage of our empathy?
I think the most important part here is actually about communication. It is better. This is one of the advice that I always keep with me since the past. It is always better to over communicate rather than under communicate. Which means that if let's say we feel that something is not right with the students, just ask. Talk to him, talk to her, get to know better. Because sometimes, a lot of time, I know that some of us, because maybe we just want to take it easy, we just assume, the students may just want to take, students are actually taking chance on this. But we never know until we ask. So the most important I think, because there are so many medium of communication right now. We have WhatsApp, we have Telegram, we have Microsoft Teams to communicate, we have email as well. Even we can make a phone call. I mean, we have to do that. And I really hope, I know I have to admit this, teaching online is very hard actually, especially during this emergency remote teaching. And we hope that we could overcome this together, and hopefully it will end with vaccine coming in and so on, and we can go back to our face-to-face teaching. But of course, with the skill that we have during this time, with online learning and so whatsoever, blended learning is an option in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Muhammad Tazli. We hope that by being an empathetic educator, we don't lose focus on the students' learning. Yeah. Okay. Now we are towards the end of the webinar. We have the last speaker, Dr. Tan Ju Siang, who will be talking about recognizing and managing digital fatigue. The best person to talk about this, because Dr. Tan is a licensed counselor. Over to you, Dr. Tan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marlia. Hello, everyone. I truly enjoyed what had been shared by Dr. Tazli, a while ago. I'm sure that the topic about empathy does not limited to only psychologists or counselors, but all of us here as educators or, as a human being. So I'm Ivy. I'm honored to be part of the webinar sharing session today, organized by Center for Engineering Education, UTM. So to the audience who are with me right now, let me ask you one question. After listening to 3 speakers before me, do you feel tired right now? Of course, I don't get the answer, but no worries. If you don't have that answer, it's still fine. Or even I don't get the answer from you, still fine. So if you do and your answer is no, I would say great, because I know that you are still feeling fresh. Yeah. If the answer is yes, I would say congratulations. Why? Because you are aware of how your body responds to your tiredness. And this is very important when we talk about digital fatigue. All right. So for today's sessions, I will briefly talk about 3 topics, very briefly, on how to recognize the state of digital fatigue. And towards the end, we hope that we are able to name 3 our approach in dealing with the digital fatigue, and also propose some self-care strategies to enhance our own overall well-being. So let's move on to the next slide. So let's do it together. So what do I mean by that? So let us spend 1 minute together. What are we going to do? Let's take 3 deep breaths before we continue the session. All right, and let's do it together. Take a deep breath, inhale, and you slowly exhale. Great. I'm assuming you are doing with me. All right, so let's do it one more time. Inhale and exhale. Wonderful. And let's do it for the last round. Inhale and exhale. You're doing great. All right. Let's put up a big smile for yourself. All right. And also for me, though I can't see you on my screen. But thank you, for doing it with me. So let us look at some of the interesting facts that I found online. Let's move on to the next slide. Very briefly, all right? And this is a report by the Digital 2020 report that released in April, right? Just recently. So we do know that the world has changed dramatically over the first 3 months of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic impacting almost every aspect of our lives. And these changes have been clearly evident in the world's digital behavior, as we can see from the data, from the statistic, especially as billions of people turn to connected device to help us, or every one of us, cope with life and work under lockdown, or in Malaysia, particularly under MCO. So every day, the number of social media users increases. Now, from here, the slide, you can see that we have overall 7.77 billion digital users in the world. Let's move on very quickly to the next slide. And over here, you can see that the number increased, right? So today in 2020, I think we have more than half of the world's population uses social media. And, you know, from the slide, you can see that, the most used are increasing dramatically, with the percentage of 8.7% are active social media users. All right, so I'm sure social media is one of the best ways for people to connect with one another, and digital devices have been used in many ways, including education, right? So that's why we can see that by referring to the statistic, we can see the numbers of users increasing, right, from time to time, especially during the period of COVID-19 pandemic. So let's move on. Right. So these are just merely sharing with you the different devices being used by all the users in the internet. Right. I think the one that marked the highest is the mobile devices that have been used by 76% of the users. All right, let's move on. And particularly in Malaysia, there were 26.69 million internet users in Malaysia just in January 2020. I'm definitely pretty sure that the number increased, when now we are in July, definitely increased tremendously because of the MCO. Yes, let's move on. And this is interesting facts, that I got it from the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Ministry. Over here, we can see that young adults at the age of 20 are among the groups that mark the highest hours of daily use of internet, which I assume that you with me today mainly are educators or even learners, right? So that's why our students, or you, some of you now watching with us, you are the group that mark the highest hours of daily use of internet. And let's move on. And interestingly, the content related to education is the highest content shared online, and definitely it relates to us, right, closely. So let's move on. So due to the reason COVID-19, we all feel disruption and the pain of being socially restricted and isolated, right? And during the critical time of movement control, or in some countries, we name it as lockdown or circuit breakers, schools and education institutions, including university like UTM, we have started the emergency remote teaching. And many of us being to use more, or forced or to try to use more of digital devices, including our laptops, smartphones, iPads, and tools for teaching and learning. And I'm sure you can see from my side that there are a lot of online learning tools, right? So how many of these online learning tools that you are very familiar with? I might not get the answer from you, but it's still fine, right? And probably some, when you look through all these learning tools, right, some of you might not even know what are these tools for and how can we use it, right? But of course, I'm not doing the talk about this, but we do know that when every one of us involved in this abrupt, migration to ERT, emergency remote teaching, and we realize that the create crisis and disaster create disruption to us and to our students as well in general, all right? Because there are a lot of new things, as what Dr. Tazli has said, that we feel stressful probably, right? So let's move on. If you haven't been thinking all about this, and probably the term, the digital fatigue is a new term to you. Let's start from here. So let's count how many apps you have installed in your digital device. If you want to quickly look at your phone, you might want to count it, And do you find that you have too many apps installed in your digital device? What do you think? Probably the answer is still yes or no, right? And we do have a poll survey that been posted earlier on, all right? So let's look at the Mentimeter results. Or if you haven't, yeah, we can also look at it. Like what would be the best word to describe your feelings while implementing ERT? All right, I can see that frustrating, you want this to be over as soon as possible, and you find it overwhelming, frustrated, stressful, challenged, right? Thank you for all the answers given. Now, we are all in the same boat, right? So now, if you're finding that you are more exhausted at the end of your work day or school day than you used to be, I would like to say that you are not alone. Now, thank you for that Mentimeter. Oh, I have more coming in. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's firefighting. Yeah. Right. And some of you feel that is, a 90 degrees learning curve. Right. Definitely, we experience such a new thing. Not just a new norms or new normal to us, but it's a new challenge, right? Thank you for that. Do you still have any more results? Okay, right. Thank you. So back to that, right? So these are what we have been, experienced, right? With all the feedback that I get from you, I would like to say that you're not alone, and I feel so grateful that I'm not alone as well. Since early March, there are more and more people worldwide who experience digital fatigue. Some might call it Zoom fatigue, particularly, and etc. So since ERT is an emergency, therefore we are asked to respond to the emergency in a very short period of time. So this is where I think empathy comes in. We must also be empathetic to ourselves. Let's look at my slides. I have a few questions, for you. So first, do you feel exhausted physically and mentally after having continued online meetings or classes, ERT? Now, if majority of your day is spent on apps and replying messages that are overwhelming, do you feel that way? And sometimes you find that you need to juggling through dozens of apps while trying to achieve expectations for teaching and learning. And I think there's one more. And yeah, exactly. And sometimes you feel disengaged. All right. And again, I wanted to tell you, if these are what you have been feeling throughout this period of time, it's fine. It's absolutely okay. And you're not alone. So let's move on and we look at more closely what is digital fatigue. Some of you might ask me, right? So digital fatigue is a state of mental exhaustion and disengagement when we are required to use multiple apps and tools in daily life, right? So, and also digital fatigue is a feeling of fatigue when we are constantly being required to be online and also plug in. So probably some of us feel that we have been overwhelmed by a sense of overload from media, resources, and messages, but also from the impending priorities of digital pedagogies, right? Because we have to use that. So, however, I just wanted to share that it is not classified as a medical condition. So it's definitely fine and okay that if you feel it that way. But however, it is important for us to assess whether the feeling of fatigue or exhaustion is a result of overuse of technology or of other aspects of our lives. Stress from technology fatigue can and should be addressed, but this does not exclude some other sources of stress in our lives as well, right? But basically, why? Why are we experiencing digital fatigue? Basically, when teaching online, though we are facing at our screen, right, what I'm doing right now, but our brain will not just focus on the screen. Instead, our brain is so smart that it will also pick up every single cue that we can capture. And this is where our brain is constantly working hard when we are on remote teaching, especially on ERT, right? At the same time, there's a human need for us to get connected with people, especially when we know there are people around. Like for me, right? Even though I can't see you, we don't see each other face to face, but we know that, and I know that you're around with me. So it's common for us to seek attention from the audience, right? And this contributed to our extra effort in making connection with people around. I'm sure some of you, when we first started our Zoom teaching, we tend to ask, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you with me? Right? Constantly. So this sometimes can be pretty, tired, So, and also in online teaching and learning, we have to focus more intensely on conversation in order to absorb information. Now, think of it this way. When we are sitting in classroom, we can still exchange information from one another, right? Especially when we ask questions, students will answer to us. And sometimes when we need to catch up on information. But during a video call, it is impossible to do this unless we use the private chat features or awkwardly try to find a moment to unmute and ask a colleague to repeat themselves, right? So on a video call, the only way to show that we are paying attention is to look at the camera. But in real life, how often actually do we stand within a few steps from our colleague or students and stare at our face, right? Just like how I'm like looking at my screen right now. So insufficient, redundant, and time-consuming processes could actually expose us to the threat of digital fatigue. So as you can see from the screen that we might probably feel emotionally exhausted, right? And sometimes when talk about work, we might feel dissatisfied with our work, right? And we also feel disengaged, right? So this can be what we are experiencing right now. By saying so, ironically, we might feel tired, of being constantly connected to the device, yet we think we might also missing out information if we don't keep it up to date, right? Right. So by saying so, I hope we can now be more aware of how ERT of many forms of online teaching and learning meetings are making us feel tired. So let's look at what are some of the positive symptoms that some of us might be experiencing. Right, we can show it all at once. Thank you. Now, these are some of the possible symptoms. I just said that it's a possible symptoms means that because we are all different, right? And the time that we engage in using digital device are also very different. So physically, we might feel fatigue. I don't know whether some of you feel that, I feel back pain, throughout the MCO and tight muscles, right? And cognitively, because there's a lot of information that you need to absorb and respond to it, ended up we might have difficulty to commit and able to stay focused and concentrate. In terms of society, we might feel disengaged because we don't really feel the presence of the person, right? And therefore, emotionally, we feel easily agitated or annoyed or stressful. And even in terms of energy, probably we might lack of enjoyment in working and studying, and towards the end, probably diminishing our self-confidence and ask ourselves whether we are doing okay and all right. So these are some of the possible symptoms. But let's look at how we can actually recognizing it. So in terms of knowing what is digital fatigue, how we are going to recognize it, and I want to talk about some, the digital fatigue, the 3R approach. Yeah. So we can actually show there's another part of it. These are the 3 main approaches. First, to recognize, right? So first, aware of the warning signs of digital fatigue. So you can try to recall what I just said earlier on, right? And we have to do the reverse, meaning that we try to undo the damage. Later on, I'll share a little bit of tips on how to undo that. And the third is to recover, meaning that we can slowly recover from the feeling of fatigue and build our resilience, right? With suitable strategies. So let's look at what we can do. Right, so these are some of the possible tips, right? First, take a break from technology. I'm sure we all know that, right? But it's a matter of whether we practice that or not, right? So basically put our phone away, especially off office hours. And it's okay to remind ourselves to take the information later. If it's really urgent, remember that people can still contact you through phone, right? And we might want to switch to airplane mode, like what I'm doing right now, right? So many of us use our smartphones as a tool for note taking, right? But sometimes at the same time, we might be constantly interrupted by other texts and messages, right? So it's okay to switch to airplane mode. And we need to take mini breaks from video during a longer course. That's what I did in the very beginning. I said, let's take some few deep breaths together. So this is considered some mini break, in between. And it's good to start the day with a relaxing ritual. All right. For example, you might want to give yourself, a cup of coffee before you start a day. So this is considered a relaxing ritual. And you might want to adopt some healthy habits. What can for example, avoid multitasking. Even if you think that you are good in multitasking, what do I mean by that? Basically, we don't multitask. Actually, we task switch. The word multitasking implies that we can do two or more things at once, but in reality, our brains only allow us to do one thing at a time, and we have to switch back and forth, right? So basically, we focus on one task at a time, and probably only switch on one device at a time. So this is something that you might want to adopt that would help you, all right? And then, of course, next one, we talk about setting boundaries, right? So it's important. Sorry, back to the previous slide. Okay, I hope I'm not taking too much time. About to end. This is the last slide, right? Set boundaries, meaning that there are certain times that we want to set boundaries and be able to say no. All right, especially on incoming messages, right? During off-office hour, and it's also very good to engage in personal engagement. So meaning that we wanted to, find ways to interact with others face to face or in person, and this will help to nourish us, right? And also, last but not least, to nourish our creative side by cultivate hobbies that do not require the use of technology. And also, one thing that probably we wanted to enjoy moment of silence, right? Even during meeting of classes. So these are some of the possible tips that I hope that, that we can all start to apply it. Not all at once, but one at a time. And hopefully did help us to reduce, to do the reverse and gradually recover from digital fatigue. That's all for my sharing today. Let's see whether I have any question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tan. I believe there is a Mentimeter that we get the audience to respond earlier. What would be the best word to describe your feelings on ERT? You have highlighted that earlier, right? Have you?
Yes, I did.
All right. So now let's go to the question posed by the audience. Dr. Nicholas Chia has asked, how can we break away from the habit of multitasking?
Right. First of all, I think it's good to remind us that multitasking actually do not exist, as what I mentioned just now, right? But what we do is we tend to switch tasks from one to another. So it's good to remind us mentally and also to put it in practice that we open one device one at a time and really spend time to focus on that task before we move on to the second task. There are certain research that highlighted on this, that people who tend to multitask or assuming or believe that they are actually multitasking, they tend to have shorter memory span. That's from some of the research. But of course, I'm hoping to have to look at more research coming up and see how multitasking, or while some of us opening a lot of devices, would affect our cognition, because we tend to overload it with a lot of information and restrict us from having a better memory span.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
The next question is from Dr. Magila Nalapan. How to manage gadget addiction?
Now, first of all, when you posted this question, I'm sure that you are showing concern of this, right? Probably for your students as well. So it's good to keep all of us remind that when you're aware that you are being, using a gadget for a long period of time, we should actually have mini break, as I mentioned just now. It's good to have mini breaks in between. But at the same time, those who get addicted with all the gadgets, it's not about the gadgets, right? It's about the emotions, the feelings that they have it. For example, engage in online games, and that person feel a lot of fun and they find it very entertaining. So this is the part that the person get addicted, because they need the attention, they need the fun, they need the pleasure. So it's very good and important to remind that person to engage in in-person connection, the person-to-person connection, in order to replace that, right? Because if you cannot find that stimuli in your daily lives, it's very hard, for a student to stop using that gadget at that period of time.
Yeah, not only the students have digital fatigue, we are more concerned if the educators have digital fatigue.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Marlia.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Tan. We hope that the audience have managed to get the input from Dr. Ivy just now and are more aware of the causes of digital fatigue and maybe practice some tips that you have highlighted earlier on. Yeah. Okay, thank you to the audience who have been with us since 3 o'clock this afternoon. We have come to the end of this webinar. Okay, so they are all here. Right, we will start with Dr. Suhairi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marlia. Just a simple takeaway for you. We did not try to make it simple in the activity. If you remember, we have discussed about the taxonomy. We have the ICAP taxonomy, and you can use it. The only thing that you're going to make it simple is just to expand the time for them to do the activity. So my last word is, if you want to try this activity, keep it simple. Try a baby step and do one at a time. After you get it more comfortable, you can move to the more challenging kind of activities. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Marlia.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Suhairi, for the brief final point there. Okay, Dr. Kamaruddin.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marlia. My simple advice is make sure we try to practice the tools that we want to use for our online learning, and make sure that it is online, it is aligned with our objective and also our teaching and learning activities. And also make sure that you look at the constraint that basically affect the student and also ourselves as a teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Alignment. Good. Okay, Dr. Tazli, your final message.
I would like to address a point that I missed just now when we talk about as how actually we could have being an empathetic educator with our students. One of the things that for example, like people are seeing that, okay, maybe this is like a pampering students or we're just being too kind to the student, for example. That is not what I meant. The first thing is actually we have to really differentiate between what is being having sympathy and having empathy. There's two different things. Maybe we can Google and find the answer. That's one. The second one is actually when we wanted to have, for example, like we can still give a challenge task to the students, but of course we need to give an ample time for them to solve that particular challenge. And I would really encourage, for example, the educators, try to talk to your colleagues whenever that you want to give some kind of project, because whenever that you want to give team project to them, it is also about achieving to demonstrate the teamwork. So why not try to combine those projects together, making it as kind of integrated project, so that the students can do it as a team and kill 2 or 3 birds in one stone, right? So that is my final takeaway. So I hope that becoming an educator, learning about being empathy, it takes time. Of course, it takes time, but inshallah, by God willing, that by the strong will of ourselves, we will become an empathetic educator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We all hope that we become an empathetic educator and the students do not take advantage of us. Okay, so finally we have Dr. Ivy who will give us her final note.
Yeah, I want to take the word from Dr. Tazli as well. I think it's important for us to have empathy for ourselves as well, right? To understand why and what we are struggling with. And it's okay to be tired of it and have enough of it and be frustrated over it, right? So this sense of empathy is part of self-care. And I think then only we can decide to be more thoughtful and reflective users of media. So I think our main challenge is to use it wisely, else that self-care is more important than the other thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ivy. So thank you to everyone who has stayed till the end of this webinar. Some points that I would like to conclude before we end. This pandemic is actually shaping our teaching and professional training in institutions of higher learning right now. So ERT must become a part of our skill set. Yeah, and knowledge on ERT activities, tools, understanding students, understanding our digital fatigue and the students' digital fatigue will be valuable when the university reopens. And this new normal surely will encourage teachers to use more, to engage more in online classes. And of course, there are no right or wrong answers as to which activity is or which tool is correct or better. But I really believe that we have the strength that is our flexibility to improvise our teaching and ensure that meaningful learning will happen in our classroom. And this pandemic has actually unleashed a lot of creative teaching and learning, and we hope that we can leverage on that. So this webinar has brought together the power of people and technology to the audience, and we hope that we have provided some actionable insights that educators can use in the future. So I leave you with this statement. We of course cannot predict the future, but we can go forward prepared. So over to Dr. Mahyudin to end the webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Marlia, and to all speakers. You are doing great. On 22nd of July, the Dr. Seven Miklos will be with us live from this channel to share on the foundation of problem-based learning. Make sure you save the date. At UTM CEE, we are offering master and doctoral program in engineering education. We are also providing training, capacity building for problem-based learning change agents. Check out our website for more info. If you like this video, please give us like and share. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.